Hi, I'm Brian from Paint with Brian, and today we're painting Summer Crape Myrtle. Okay, here's the inventory. A full palette of plaid FolkArt paint with the small and large gold Taklon brush and the liner. A bit of inspiration here, Crape Myrtle with pink flowers. And on my palette with the large brush, I'm scooping up 3 brushfuls of the wicker white. I'm going to mix the sky color. I've added the true blue and want to mix that up well so they all become one color. You want to mix the darkest color of your sky color. If you look at the image on the upper right, you can see that's at the top. Some water added to the mix to make it flow correctly. You want it nice and solid and opaque, not translucent. Don't want to be able to see through it, but it needs to flow nicely. Holding the brush, moving my arm, staying tight along this top line to get solid blue sky color along the top. Definitely don't want to be overly thick, and you shouldn't have to scrub it on either. Should flow nice and easy. Side to side, and we want to keep an organic, irregular line at the bottom edge of this blue. A bit more water into the mix. Always when you add water, be sure to spin it up really good in the paint so the two mix together. Just leveling it out here. Chiseling off the edge. Tapping into the wicker white. I'm setting this on the line where the blue meets the white of the canvas. Side to side, and the two mix. This is called wet in wet blending. They mix to create a lighter value, impression of the sky. And keep adding white and blending as I move downwards. Now I can blend up to the blue, but only while it's wet. You can't do that after it's dry. It won't look the same. So I want to work this entire section while it's still wet. And there's plenty of blue in the brush. I just need to keep adding white to it as I go downwards. Now I left the lower section fairly light because the sky is darkest straight above, and as you go down in the sky it gets lighter down to the horizon. It gets very light. You can change this if you like. You can continue with some lighter blue at the bottom. You could actually start this out with the whole background just being painted a light blue. One solid tone. But I like to use the sky for backgrounds. It gives good depth. It's good if you're painting just a static object like a fleur-de-lis or a vase. It's a quick and easy background with a lot of depth. Still blue in the brush that I'm pressing out there. And I want to up the contrast a bit. I'm adding some solid wicker white to the wet surface to see if I can get more contrast. And I just blend that out lightly. This technique works great on walls. Now I'm mixing wicker white with holly leaf, and I want to mix the darkest color of my foliage. So I add coffee bean brown to it to desaturate the color, to make this shadowed tone for the green section. We'll start dark green and we work up to light from there, but this is for the first layer. So you want it to be the darkest color of the green and the most desaturated or toned down. And that's why I put the coffee bean brown into it. That will desaturate any color. Into the water cup with my large brush. I'm just using that to blend. Now I'm going to crumple up this paper towel in an irregular form, and this will be the tool for applying the darkest green. Pick out a section, test it out by slowly tapping it on there. Should be a dark, desaturated green, as it is. And I'm just starting lightly to test it out. I like to do a slow build. That way I can change accordingly. Taking a sort of angled and open pattern to this, and I'll tighten it up as I go along. Be sure to change the angle that you hold the paper towel so it doesn't always make the same imprint, the same form, or what we call rabbit tracks, where they're dotted along always in the same pattern. You want to mix that up. I'm just imagining the branches going out from the trunk to different areas beyond the tree trunk where the foliage will be. Working it all the way to the edge. I always say work off the edge of the canvas. It doesn't stop just an inch short of there. If we take a picture of a tree, we will see that the foliage and limbs and everything in there goes all the way off the edge of the canvas. Now I have a lot on here, and I'm starting to tighten up some of the areas, interconnect some of these patches. And if you see any form that looks strange, like a perfect circle, be sure to stamp over that as well. This is setting the stage for our main tone, which will be the brighter green. So a lot of what you do here will get covered up. There I got a pretty tight section, so I want to balance it out by tightening it up in some other areas just as strong. Again, just strengthening some areas, interconnecting. And now on to mixing our main tone. We can use the same plate, the same palette, where we had the darkest color before, adding the wicker white to it to bring the value up, to lighten it. Then into the holly leaf green, spinning that up. Into the water to get the mix to flow and stretch out, and into the school bus yellow to make it more yellowish. We'll make it warmer. Again, enough water into the mix to stretch it out. Chisel off, and I'm done with the large brush, so I put it into the water cup. Get a new napkin, crumple it up, tap into our main tone now. And I think of the light source, I'm running my hand down, that's where the light source would be coming from, the top. So on these forms, these massives, I want to stay on the top side of them. I start out on the top and move downwards. I don't want to cover up all of the dark, but the top side is going to be my reference point. Always coming in and building on the top side. I'm interconnecting as I go along. And again, if you want to hide something, make sure you go over it. But if you like a form, stay away from it. Always on the top side and interconnecting. It's also okay if you end up covering all of a dark section. That happens too if enough sunlight passes through. It can really light up the leaves. But in general, I want to save at least a small amount of the original dark color. Mixing up some water into the mix just to stretch it out. Upper side, lighten these forms, interconnect. Again, I work in a slow build. I don't want to repeat really fast or get into a hurry, because then I'll make the rabbit track form or 4 round dots in a row and I'll have to get rid of that. I look at a section and hope to see how I can improve it, bring in the light, make it denser in certain areas. Again, mixing up because acrylic paint tends to dry fast. There we have a nice big tight section. So I want that evenly throughout my painting. I don't want just all of those kind of forms on one side of the canvas and then none on the other. Just spread them out. Now we can see both colors are still prevalent throughout. The dark spots are smaller because we've started with the light. We go into the form and we just leave some of that shadowed area at the bottom. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Okay, getting a new plate, a new palette, and we're going to mix the lightest value of green. I get the large brush out of the water cup and put some of the wicker white onto the plate and mix the holly leaf into the white. This needs to be our lightest value. I'm adding yellow to keep it bright and warm. It needs to be one value lighter than the last main tone that we made. Adding white to it to lighten it up. Spin it up really good. Get it all mixed up together. Testing it out on the surface. I can see it, but it needs to be a little bit lighter. Some more white. A little bit more yellow. Into the water a few times and spinning it up. Get it all mixed up together. Chisel off that excess. And back into the water cup with a large brush and onto a new napkin. A new paper towel. Tap down into our mix This time I want to stay again on the top side, just the top upper third there, so I can leave the last two colors that we had. And it should be irregular, what we call an organic form, a natural form. I don't want a repeat form, so I twist the napkin a little bit, change it side to side, thinking about the sunlight coming down across the top. And if anything needs to be covered up, or looks like a section needs to be broken up, this is a good time to do it. This is the last green value that we'll put on here. Everything that I paint, I try to do in 3 values, 3 lightnesses. Typically with the shadow tone, main tone, and this, the highlight tone. Just going along the top side of some sections. As I always say, if something looks flat, not very three-dimensional, it usually means it needs another value on it. So here we're getting the depth, some variation of color and value. Little interconnection there. If some pieces just seem to be lost and floating alone. Now, here we have the example. When we look at the lower half, we have the 3rd value, and the top just has the 2 values. So we're getting the depth and a certain level of softness. The upper side looks really nice up against that blue. It's just a matter of fine-tuning wherever it looks like it might need the lighter value or the shape broken up or tightened up. Fortunately, there's a lot of leeway. Leaves go all different directions. Sunlight can have some strange dynamics. There's not just one right way to do this. And like I always say, have fun with paint. The idea with this is to create something semi-three-dimensional looking, but to have fun in the activity And it's surprising with the paper towel how much you can get done in a short amount of time. So this is also fun because I'm used to mostly nowadays only working with brushes. Which brings to mind you could also use a sea sponge to do this. And if you do, I would just make sure the sea sponge is not overly wet. You have to be able to hold enough paint to get it to cover on the surface. And now onto a new palette, a new paper plate. We're mixing up the color, the darkest color for the flowers of the summer crepe myrtle. Some white. I'm not bothered by that bit of green in the mix, that's just water. And I dip into the engine red, mixing the wicker white and engine red together. And I want to create the darkest value of my crepe myrtle flower. Into the water. I'm satisfied with the color. I really don't need to desaturate that with brown. And this is the darker color of our flower. I hold my napkin a bit tighter, a little bit more controlled, and pick out the place to put my first flower, which has a sort of cone shape. They can change depending on the direction they're pointing. I want to get them nice and solid. It's okay if it's a little bit translucent on the edge, but the center core of it I want pretty solid in this nice color. And I'm thinking different sizes, different directions. And it's a good idea to put just one and then two of them close together, and maybe two close together going different directions. The more we mix that up, the more natural it will appear. Just building the sort of cone shape there and making sure I have good opacity. If not, just get a little bit more paint on the napkin. There we get to see it next to our nice blue sky. some going the other direction. And always feel free, if you see something odd out there, just cover it up with a flower. Towards the end, I just want to double check I don't have like 3 in a row are all the same size, or too many on one side, not balanced out enough. It's just a matter of looking around. Okay, with the same palette on top of the same color, I'm going to make the next lightest value by adding the wicker white to it and spinning up real good. Just one lighter value and the water into that. Using the large brush to mix this up. Set it back in the cup. Now I'm going to get my paper towel really tight and twist the end there. I want it more controlled. I need to put the highlight side on these. So I just dab down. The upper side, I'm taking the upper and right side on the large one there. And you can see I cover approximately 2/3 of the flower with the highlight. Now, all depends on the angle of the flower and the sun. So sometimes more, sometimes less. But I just want this next lightest value to appear on this cone form, that you can tell that there's 2 values on it. And I'm thinking that's all we need for the flowers, because they're pretty small. So with just 2 values, we get a certain softness, as you can see in this lower half here where we have them done. And we have depth and dimension. It has plenty of movement. You could literally spend hours on end just getting this far with it, even though the paper towel is quick to work with. Some of us like to get more detailed in our paintings. Some of us have a limited time to do our projects, and I respect that. And that's why we're getting the whole thing done in 1 hour here, to give you a good idea of how this is done. Okay, getting ready to make the darkest color of the tree trunk. I'm using the same palette and go in with wicker white and the coffee bean brown. Get this stirred up really good. More of the red, because I want a reddish brown. I've added red and yellow, which make orange, and then with the brown, orangish brown. And then I'll add some black to make it the darkest value, the licorice black. So we have wicker white, the engine red, school bus yellow, the coffee bean brown, and the licorice black to make a dark warm brown. Add the water to it and start out painting with the large brush to make the large trunk. I tested out on the surface, looks good. And I'm holding my brush straight on, not side to side, straight on, curving down because I want an interesting looking trunk, pressing down a little bit harder as I go along into the water and spin it up. Make sure it flows nicely. Bring it out a little bit wider, adding a little bump there to make it interesting. It's a chance to clean up the edge. Trunk gets wider as it comes down. And I want it nice and opaque, nice and solid. You can see this covers quite nicely over that light background. Then onto my small gold Taklon brush and into the water, into the paint, and spin it up. And now to make limbs coming off my large trunk, again straight on, not to the side, just straight on like an arrow. Set and pull and pressing down a little bit harder as I move on. And then onto the main trunk. More water. It has to flow nicely. You just have to figure out where to start out. Make it curved, natural, irregular. And this is just blocking in all with this tone that we made. Give a little curve there. This is setting the actual form that we will be working with later on. Curving off to the side here and lighter with the touch as I go out because the limbs get thinner. So it depends on the direction you're going as to when you have to press harder. If you're starting out from the main trunk, press harder and then go light. And if it's the opposite, like when we started, start out light and press hard as you get towards the trunk. Low angle with that brush to make a thin line with the small brush. And again, I like to add the little curves when two of the branches meet, or the branch with the trunk. And it's all about quality, not quantity. It's better just to have a few nicely shaped limbs than a lot of limbs that aren't well thought out. If you're new to this, you can even start out with a little exercise on just a sheet of paper and try out the motions before you get onto your bigger painting. This is a 16 by 20 stretched canvas, but you can do this painting on a 5 by 8 panel, a 10 by 12, a 2 by 2, or even a wall. Let's say one wall in a nursery. This would be cute. just a slow build to draw my form. It's what I call drawing with the brush, because we don't need to draw it. Now with the gold Taklon liner brush, I'm mixing into the exact same color so I can do the small limbs that come off of these medium-sized limbs. I need it to flow well, so there's plenty of water in the mix, and come off with a branch and a little fork at the end of that. I generally have these running to the area where there's foliage, but they don't always need to end there. If you look at an actual crepe myrtle, it will have old sticks from the last year that are just bare. They don't have anything on them because it blooms on new growth, and that's where the leaves and flowers are. And that's why we groom them back really hard every February here in the South, because all of that new growth comes out and you get lots of flowers and foliage on the new growth. But back to our twigs, our thin limbs. Different angles, different lengths, some with a fork, some not, some with many. All of the green in the background is dry now, and acrylic paints dry fast, but I want to make sure I don't drag my hand through some of this wet brown. So after I load up, I really think about placement and where my hand is. If it's touching any part of the canvas, I need to make sure it's not going to smudge that brown everywhere. I have a little trick where I stick out just my pinky, and my pinky will rest on the canvas, and then I can pull my arm along and make the line. It's just a little support. Again, into the water, spin it up, and I'm making the one lighter value. So I added white and it looked a little bland there, so I added yellow to make it warm. And a little bit more of the brown into the water. I want one value lighter, and with the small brush again, this next lightest value, I'm starting out on this left side here, just a little line to test it out. Looks good, I can see it. I don't want to outline everything. This is the second value, which is the main tone. If an area is heavily shadowed, not much will show up. if it really hits the light more. You can see on that limb up there I went 2/3 highlight side, which is the upper side. I'm going to take both sides of this large trunk, make it catching light, and you can see the coloration of the trunk. But always preserve your dark areas. It's better to do that than cover up all the dark area and then you have to go back to the dark. I'm staying on the upper side of these limbs. Just imagining where some of the light from above would peek through. A little accent. Upper side of this limb, covering 2/3 highlight side. Like I said, there's pretty much leeway. All depends on what the angle of the branch is, how the light is working. Maybe some of the foliage blocks out the light. There's several different dynamics, so it doesn't make one way right or wrong. But I just like to have a process. And so on this I'm going mainly 2/3 highlight side, upper side, imagining the light coming down. With my liner, and I'm making small branches come off onto that. They don't need to have all 3 values, or all 2 values at now. Just cleaning up on the upper side of that, and the more twigs and details that you have, the more interesting it will be. Just on the highlight side of that. A twig coming off. Now I want to mix my third and lightest value. I take the same color and I'm adding more wicker white to it, the third and lightest value, into the water because I want it to flow well. And using the small brush, and I want to use this very sparingly, just imagining where light pops through. So right on the edge there, preserving my other 2 values that I worked so hard to get. And anything that comes out at you will have a lighter value. We have it on the top side in this curved nook there. Upper side. And I call that highlight 1/3 highlight side. Just takes a little accent here and there. Anywhere light is passing through, anything that looks stark or flat, a third value will make it pop. Now with the liner brush, just in the highlight side, anywhere you need to clean up. You can see this third value, we get that level of softness that we had in the background when we have the third value added to it. Just imagining where light would catch. And I can add some of the branches, some of the twig-like branches coming off of here, and just full light. They don't need all three values. Okay, here it is in the frame, and it looks good. Lots of movement, good color and form, all the values. If you've gotten this far, great job. And as for mine, there are a couple of areas I want to clean up and try some things with, especially in this white section. So adding just a little condensed bonus step to the end of this. Don't feel obliged to do it. I'm mixing up a light blue, very similar to the lightest blue that's at the bottom of the blue sky. And I'm just going in with the medium brush, and I'm using this to colorize the white section, clean up some of my foliage, clean up the edge of some of my tree limbs, and just jumping around in some different sections. And this isn't much of a value change from the white. It's maybe a half a step darker. You can see as I move downwards. And you could literally spend hours on end on this 1 hour painting, which is great if you enjoy doing that. And if you have the time to do that. Not all students do. But I just wanted to see how far I could push it and clean up a few things. Let's continue with the lighter blue downwards. And I want to keep that leaf edge form to the foliage masses, cleaning up the trunk here along the lower side of the branch. And now more of the light brown mix for more of the twig forms. And as I mentioned before, the more of these that you can put on something, the more movement you'll get. I have some lines going to the flowers, and here it is framed again. Pretty much the same thing, cleaned up a little bit, but overall the same thing. And I hope you enjoyed this painting as much as I did. Please like and subscribe, and please comment, especially if you have questions. This is Brian, and as always, encouraging you to have fun with paint.